There are more than 11,000 tantric literatures on all kinds of things, from building houses to maintaining communities to taking care of cows to mathematics, geometry, science, medicine. Trying to practice Tantra without first reading the Tantras is ridiculous. I suppose some people will say or believe anything to justify their sex addiction. But Tantra is much, much deeper than that. Tantra is a gateway. If you master Tantra, you can travel to any planet in any dimension or universe and transfer your existence there. It's a vehicle. But that kind of misunderstanding is bound to happen when we take highly technical information out of its proper context. Imagine trying to read a computer manual or a modern novel to an Amazonian tribal hunter. What kind of understanding or meaning do you think he'll get out of it? He will certainly misunderstand it. The material is based on a context that he has had no contact with whatsoever. Trying to practice yoga and tantra without studying the Vedas is the same kind of thing. Understanding and apprehending the full value of these great Vedic traditions and their powerful practices requires us to place them in the proper context, and that context is the Vedic literature, and beyond that, the esoteric teaching. So, context is a very important part of any kind of learning, any kind of study. But it's especially important in terms of an ontological study like the esoteric teaching. We cannot understand the true nature of consciousness in a materialistic context. We are putting the object into a context in which it is not fully revealed. In fact, it's distorted and covered. To understand consciousness, to understand ourselves, we have to view the subject in a context which contains sufficient categories to reveal it completely. We have to study it with a sufficiently powerful ontology to reveal all of its subtle nuances and different hard-to-get-at features. Just like a complex computer program. If you don't read the manual, if you just try to figure it out on your own, it may take you a long time. In fact, it may take some people forever to get to some of the more subtle and obscure features of the program. But if you have the manual, you can simply look it up and have access to them immediately. Well, consider the Vedic literatures as the manual of consciousness. They describe everything about it, its background, where it comes from, how it's composed, how it develops, what are its different changes, and so on and so forth. So, yoga, tantra, and meditation are ultimately about consciousness. They are sciences of transforming consciousness in different ways. So if we try to study these things without reference to the Vedic background, if we try to study them from a psychological point of view or a Western physical science point of view, we'll get them all wrong. And we have. We can see in the Western practice of yoga and tantra a complete distortion of the original Vedic point of view. We went to India and we studied for many years. We had full access to the complete texts of the Vedas and the Tantras. And what we found there was completely different than what we had experienced on these subjects in the West. Why is this? Well, we'll go into that very deeply in future sessions, how this situation came to be, because that's an important knowledge to have to unraveling the original meaning. So it's just like we receive a book that's written in a foreign language, a language that we don't know and have never heard spoken. So without a dictionary, or a book of grammar of that language, how can we ever understand the book? Yoga and Tantra, meditation and Samadhi, different Vedic arts and sciences are like that. They are literally in a foreign language, Sanskrit, and that language is a very sophisticated language, far more deep and complex than any Western language. If we don't understand the source culture, if we don't unravel the structural assumptions that go into creating Sanskrit literature, then how will we ever understand the sciences developed using Sanskrit, or the poetry, or the rituals that are recorded in Sanskrit? So there has to be some cultural education involved in the study of yoga and Tantra and so forth. You can't just take the practices artificially outside. This is a very kind of reductionistic approach to the subject. And just like reductionistic science winds up knowing more and more about less and less until finally it knows everything about nothing, similarly, if you take these practices out of their original context, then you will mistakenly think that the practice is the whole thing and that it has no further connection. But actually, all the practices of yoga and Tantra are simply means to an end. They are, as I said before, vehicles. Well, vehicles for what? Vehicles for developing consciousness. Vehicles for attaining self-realization. Vehicles for establishing and maintaining our perfect relationship with God. Vehicles for finding our perfect body. That's the whole point of yoga, Tantra, meditation, and so many other Eastern spiritual practices. That's why they were invented. That's why they were brought to the West, was to give us a chance to actually develop these things. But we cannot develop the higher aims of yoga practice, having to do with consciousness and so forth, unless we understand what consciousness is. And our Western background simply is not sufficient to allow us to do that. So we have to bring in aspects of Vedic philosophy, the Vedic ontology, the Vedic language, Sanskrit, the Vedic scriptures, Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Vedanta Sutra, Puranas, Itihasas. We'll go over all this in another series. But without these literatures, there's no hope of our understanding the original purpose of all these sciences. So I want to impress upon you that so far, whatever we know about yoga, Tantra, and so on in the West is very restricted by the fact that we have taken these practices out of context. We've taken them out of the Vedic background and tried to present them in a commercial pseudo-culture based on media and false representation of the actual truth about the Vedic culture. Why am I telling you all this? Well, because it's our mission here to help you attain your perfect body. And to do that, you're going to need the absolute truth, or the esoteric teaching. We hope you've enjoyed this edition of My Perfect Body. This is David Hughes, your host, reminding you to visit us on the web at esotericteaching.org.